3 Krasuka-4 jamming systems. 1 concealed compound 34 kilometers behind the front line. 40% of Ukrainian FPV drone sorties in the southern sector failing mid-flight. This wasn't equipment malfunction. This was precision electronic suppression, and Ukraine's military intelligence had just found the source. I'm your host at Steel Horizon, where we analyze the battles that change wars. What you're about to hear is how the GUR, Ukraine's Military Intelligence Directorate, spent 4 weeks hunting one of the most sophisticated electronic warfare nodes Russia had deployed in the entire Zaporizhzhia theater, 3 Krasuka-4 systems. A rotating jamming schedule that had degraded Ukrainian drone operations across a 60-kilometer arc of the southern front for nearly 3 weeks. And a strike plan so precisely coordinated that when it finally executed, all 3 platforms were destroyed in the same detonation sequence, and the jamming corridor collapsed within 72 hours. This is the full tactical breakdown. Before we're done, we'll answer the question: how many replacement EW vehicles did Russia scramble forward after the strike? And how long did each one last? Stay with me. What unfolds over the next 28 minutes doesn't just destroy 3 pieces of high-value Russian equipment. It shows, in granular detail, exactly how Ukraine has learned to fight in the electromagnetic spectrum. Not just with firepower, but with patience, precision, and intelligence tradecraft that most conventional militaries wouldn't attempt. The southern Zaporizhzhia front, in the weeks leading into late May 2026, was grinding attrition. Russian forces had stabilized their defensive lines west and southwest of Tokmak following Ukrainian pressure operations earlier in the spring. The front line hadn't moved more than 3 kilometers in either direction for nearly 6 weeks. On the surface, stalemate. Underneath, a quiet crisis was building inside Ukraine's drone warfare units, FPV operators in the sector. The pilots who fly small, high-speed kamikaze drones that have become one of Ukraine's most effective battlefield weapons were reporting something unusual: link integrity failures. Signal dropout at ranges that should have been well within operational parameters. Drones losing connection mid-approach, veering off target, crashing before impact. Unit commanders initially assumed pilot fatigue, atmospheric interference, equipment variance between drone batches from different domestic manufacturers. The numbers told a different story. Over a 19-day window beginning in early May 2026, FPV drone operators across 3 brigades in the Tokmak sector logged link failures on more than 40% of active combat sorties. Staggering. In previous months, the failure rate from all causes combined had rarely exceeded 12%. Something had changed, something deliberate. The technical intelligence team at brigade level ran the numbers. They cross-referenced failure timestamps with known Russian EW activity windows. They overlaid drone launch positions with the likely coverage footprint of Russian jamming equipment. The correlation was immediate. Every major spike in link failure events corresponded to a specific 2 to 3 hour window, and those windows were rotating. Day 1, 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. Day 2, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Day 3, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Rotating on a roughly 72-hour cycle. Rotating electronic warfare. That was the signature of deliberate command node management. Not a single jammer running continuously, but multiple systems cycling through active transmission schedules to prevent thermal overload and extend operational lifespan. Ukrainian signals intelligence specialists recognized it immediately. This was Krasuka-4 operational doctrine. Russia's most capable ground-based electronic warfare platform, running a coordinated multi-unit rotation from a fixed position. Find the position, and you could end the jamming corridor in a single strike. The problem was finding it. Krasuka-4 systems are mobile. They transmit for limited windows, then go dark. And Russian EW doctrine, after years of Ukrainian targeting, had become more disciplined. Units no longer transmitted from the same location for extended periods. They moved. They used deception. They concealed positions using industrial cover, agricultural structures, tree lines. Anything that would defeat aerial thermal surveillance. Which weapon system was most critical in beginning to unravel the Krasuka network? A. FPV drone reconnaissance. B. SIGINT collection. Or C. Human infiltration? Comment below. We'll give you the full answer before the end. The GUR received the technical assessment and stood up a dedicated target development cell. 4 weeks. That was the timeline they gave themselves to locate, confirm, and prosecute a target carefully designed to be invisible. The cell combined signals intelligence from Ukrainian ground-based SIGINT collection assets with analysis of Russian logistics movement patterns in the Tokmak rear area. They pulled satellite imagery tasking. They ran cross-referencing analysis on thermal anomalies in industrial compounds within a 40-kilometer band behind the front line. Here's where it got complicated. The GUR's signals intelligence had narrowed the probable location to a 12-kilometer zone of industrial and agricultural structures southwest of Tokmak. But within that zone, there were dozens of compounds that could plausibly conceal vehicle-mounted EW systems. No single intelligence source was going to find the needle in that haystack. They needed eyes on the ground. I spent time going through the available reconstruction of this operation, and one detail kept nagging at me. The fact that the GUR chose to insert a two-person ground reconnaissance team rather than rely entirely on aerial ISR. That decision tells you something important about how Ukrainian intelligence has evolved. Drones can tell you an object is there. They can give you thermal readings, movement patterns, vehicle counts. But a trained human observer, in the right position, gives you something no sensor can: the specific operational rhythm of the people running the equipment. The 40-minute window every morning when the Krasuka arrays went into passive cooling mode. That detail didn't come from a satellite. It came from a human being watching. Stay with me. What happens in the next 18 minutes dismantles an entire electronic warfare corridor and triggers a cascading Russian response that ultimately costs them 5 high-value EW platforms. The reconnaissance team inserted via agricultural vehicle cover. An older flatbed truck, the kind that moves farm equipment between holdings in the region without attracting attention at Russian checkpoints. 2 GUR operators, professionally documented as agricultural contractors, moving through fields and access roads that local farmers had used for decades. Their cover was meticulous. Their equipment was minimal: small thermal observation devices, communications, gear, notebooks. Nothing that would look out of place if they were stopped. 3 days of observation. Then they found what they were looking for: a concealed industrial compound, a former machine maintenance facility, the kind of post-Soviet infrastructure that dots the agrarian landscape of southern Ukraine, with vehicle access from the rear via a dirt track screened by a windbreak of mature trees. The thermal signature was distinctive only if you knew what to look for: periodic heat plumes from large vehicle-mounted electronics cycling through active transmission, then a 40-minute cooling pause, then resuming. 3 separate plumes, 3 separate systems, rotating on a predictable schedule. They had their target. Confirmation took another 5 days. They needed to verify these were Krasuka 4 platforms and not some other Russian vehicle-mounted system. This meant timing active transmission windows against FPV link failure data back at brigade level. If failures spiked every time the compound's thermal signature went active, the correlation was causal. The brigade-level drone operations team ran 22 sorties during the confirmation window, logging each failure event against precise timestamps. The data was unambiguous. Every major link degradation corresponded to an active transmission window from the compound. Every clean sortie ran during the 40-minute cooling pause. The target package was complete. Now came the hardest part: designing a strike that would destroy all 3 platforms simultaneously during the passive cooling window without giving any of them time to relocate or power down in response to warning. Here's what stands out about this phase. The GUR didn't just find the target and pass coordinates to a fire mission. They engineered the strike around the target's own operational rhythm. The 40-minute cooling window wasn't just an observation. It became a tactical weapon. Ukraine's missile operators would exploit the exact moment when Russia's electronic defenses were at their weakest, ensuring that Ukrainian FPV drones could confirm hits in real time without their own feeds being jammed. The operation was designed from the ground up to eliminate the Krasuka system's only defensive advantage: their own jamming capability. The strike plan combined 2 weapon systems with very different profiles. The primary kinetic effort was a HIMARS M31A1 salvo, the guided multiple launch rocket system firing the M31A1 unitary warhead, a 200-pound high-explosive payload with terminal guidance, giving it a circular error probable under 5 meters at 70-kilometer range. The M142 launcher can fire 6 rockets in under 60 seconds. 6 rockets. 6 independently guided warheads. against 3 hardened vehicle bays housing 3 Krasuka-4 platforms. The secondary strike element was a 4-drone formation of Neptune derivative loitering munitions, modified versions of the anti-ship missiles guidance technology adapted for land attack against hardened vehicle positions. These weren't standard FPV drones. These were larger, longer-range weapons capable of precision terminal attack against specific aim points within a compound. In this case, the vehicle hardpoints where the Krasuka antenna arrays were mounted. The drone formation would attack simultaneously with the HIMARS salvo on slightly delayed timing to catch any crew attempting to evacuate vehicles in the initial blast. Timing was everything. The cooling window opened at approximately 5:20 a.m. local time, based on 3 weeks of observation data from the reconnaissance team. The strike was scheduled for 5:22 a.m., 2 minutes into the window, giving enough margin to confirm the systems had actually entered cooling mode before rockets were in the air, but close enough to the window's start that Russian operators wouldn't have time to cycle back to active transmission. At 4:45 a.m. on June 3, 2026, the HIMARS battery conducting the fire mission received final coordinates and terminal guidance data. The launcher crews ran pre-fire checks. 6 M31A1 rockets loaded. Targeting data confirmed against the GUR's compound coordinates. Launch authority granted at 5:18 a.m. At 5:20 a.m., the reconnaissance team, now repositioned to a safe observation distance, confirmed via thermal observation that all 3 Krasuka-4 arrays had entered passive cooling mode. Status transmitted to Fire Mission Control. At 5:22 a.m., 6 rockets left the launcher. Travel time to target at that range, approximately 85 to 90 seconds. Put yourself in the position of a Ukrainian FPV drone operator in the Tokmak sector at that exact moment. For 3 weeks, you've watched your drones lose link mid-mission. You've watched targets escape. You've watched the drone that was supposed to hit a Russian logistics vehicle spiral into a field because the signal died at 400 meters. And now you're sitting in a dugout, watching a countdown timer, knowing that in 90 seconds, the thing that's been doing that to your drones either stops existing or the mission has failed. At 5:23 a.m. and 47 seconds, 6M31A1 warheads impacted the compound's 3 hardened vehicle bays in a sequence spanning less than 4 seconds. The circular error probable of the overall salvo, 9 meters, against vehicle bays with footprints of 12 by 18 meters. There was no margin for survival. All 3 Krasuka-4 platforms were destroyed in the initial detonation sequence. The Neptune derivative loitering munitions arrived 11 seconds later, striking the vehicle egress points and the compound's external antenna mounting infrastructure. Secondary explosions from vehicle fuel and electronics burned through the morning. How many Krasuka-4 systems did Ukraine destroy in this single strike? A 2, B3, or C4? The answer is coming. Stay with us. At 5:24 a.m., 1 minute and 38 seconds after rocket launch, the first Ukrainian FPV drone operator in the Tokmak sector attempted a sortie. Link integrity. Perfect. Clean signal at full operational range. He relayed status up the chain with one word: clear. Within 20 minutes, FPV drone operations across the sector had resumed at full capacity. The jamming corridor that had been degrading Ukrainian drone operations for 3 weeks collapsed entirely, simultaneously. In less than 2 minutes of combat action, following 4 weeks of meticulous intelligence preparation, the battle damage assessment team used satellite imagery acquired within 90 minutes of the strike. The compound showed 3 destroyed vehicle-sized structures with severe fire damage. Thermal imaging confirmed sustained secondary burns consistent with the complete destruction of large electronic warfare platforms. OSINT investigators tracking Russian social media and military communication channels noted a significant spike in encoded logistics messages from the Tokmak rear area beginning at approximately 6 a.m., consistent with a major asset loss requiring emergency reporting up the command chain. The strike was over. The compound was destroyed. But what no one in the Ukrainian fire mission chain had fully anticipated was how rapidly and how predictably Russia would attempt to reconstitute. Here's the take that will probably get us pushback. The Russian EW command in the Zaporizhzhia theater made a catastrophic error not in their jamming operations, but in their security posture. They ran a predictable rotation schedule. 3 weeks. The same 40-minute cooling windows, The same cycle, the same compound. In an environment where Ukrainian intelligence has demonstrated for 2 years that it can find, fix, and finish high-value targets with precision, operating a critical asset from a fixed position on a predictable schedule isn't a tactical decision. It's a gift. The 3 Krasuka 4 platforms at Tokmak weren't defeated by Ukrainian firepower. They were defeated by Ukrainian patience and Russian complacency. Subscribe to Steel Horizon if you want to understand how modern warfare actually works. Not just the strikes, but the intelligence operations that make precision strikes possible. What do you think? Was the Russian decision to operate from a fixed position for 3 weeks an unavoidable operational necessity, or a command failure that should have been caught by their own security protocols? Within 48 hours of the strike, Russian military logistics channels in the Zaporizhzhia rear area began moving replacement EW assets forward. Ukrainian signals intelligence tracked the movement in near real time. 2 replacement electronic warfare vehicles, mobile systems dispatched from a staging area near Melitopol, were observed routing toward the Tokmak sector via 2 separate road corridors. Both were tracked by GUR from their point of origin. The first replacement vehicle was struck by a follow-on HIMARS fire mission on June 7, 2026, 4 days after the initial compound strike, while in transit on a secondary road approximately 18 kilometers south of Tokmak. The vehicle was destroyed in a single precision strike. No survivors in the operator crew were confirmed by Russian sources. The second replacement vehicle reached its intended operational area. It transmitted for approximately 6 hours before Ukrainian SIGINT assets locked its position. A second HIMARS fire mission struck it on June 9, 2026. Destroyed. The EW corridor that had degraded Ukrainian drone operations in the Tokmak sector for 3 weeks has remained suppressed since. As of the current date, Ukrainian drone operators in the sector report averaged link integrity consistently above 85%. Compared to below 60% during the 3-week jamming period. 5 Krasuka 4 or equivalent EW platforms have been removed from Russian order of battle in this sector since June 3rd, at a cumulative equipment value that Ukrainian defense sources estimate in excess of $180 million. If you believe tactics win wars, type Steel Horizon in the comments. The most surprising part of this operation isn't the destruction of the Krasuka systems. It's what came after. Russia's immediate response, dispatching 2 replacement vehicles forward as fast as possible, showed they understood exactly what had been lost and how urgent EW coverage restoration was. It also showed that Russian command, even after losing 3 platforms to a precision intelligence-driven strike, hadn't solved the underlying problem. The replacement vehicles moved via predictable routes, on predictable timelines, without the emissions control discipline that would have made them hard to track. GUR found them the same way they found the original compound, by watching, waiting, and letting the Russians hand them the data they needed. What would NATO doctrine have done differently to protect those replacement assets? Would dispersal, emissions, silence, and randomized routing have preserved them? Comment your analysis below. The tactical architecture of this operation deserves full examination because it represents something real in the evolution of Ukraine's military capability. This was not a reactive strike. It was not a target of opportunity. It was the conclusion of a 30-day intelligence-to-strike cycle that began with a quantitative anomaly in drone failure rates and ended with the simultaneous destruction of 3 high-value electronic warfare platforms in a single 90-second strike window. The intelligence phase signals intelligence correlation, followed by human reconnaissance insertion. The target development phase, 3 weeks of pattern-of-life observation, timing analysis, and confirmation via operational data correlation. The strike planning phase, weapon selection optimized for simultaneous destruction of multiple hardened vehicle targets, timing synchronized to the target's own operational vulnerability window. The execution phase, HIMARS M31A1 salvo combined with loitering munitions secondary attack, striking within a 9-meter CEP across all 6 warhead impacts. The exploitation phase, immediate restoration of drone operational capacity confirmed within minutes of impact. Each phase was necessary. Remove any one of them and the strike either doesn't happen or achieves partial effects that allow Russian forces to recover and reconstitute. The 4 weeks of intelligence preparation wasn't bureaucratic delay. It was the operational foundation without which the kinetic action was impossible. The HIMARS M31A1, in this context, performed exactly as designed. Range of 70-plus kilometers. Terminal guidance via GPS and inertial hybrid, resistant to basic jamming. Warhead scaled for vehicle-class targets. 6 rockets per launcher, reloadable in under 5 minutes. For this mission, destroying 3 vehicle-sized targets in a confined compound, it was the right weapon. The cost-effectiveness calculus is worth noting. 6 M31A1 rockets against 3 Krasuka-4 platforms with a combined replacement value estimated above $90 million. The economic exchange ratio was decisively favorable to Ukraine. There is a passage in the reconstructed operational planning documentation for this mission, drawn from post-operation briefings and analyst assessments, that reads almost like doctrine. The target's greatest vulnerability is its operational predictability. We do not need to match Russian electronic warfare capability. We need to study it long enough to strike at the moment it cannot defend itself. That sentence captures what Ukraine has built over 2.5 years of fighting. Not a capacity to outjam Russia, but a capacity to outthink it. One detail that stuck with me in reconstructing this operation, the 40-minute cooling window. The Krasuka-4's antenna system generates significant thermal load during active jamming operations. Standard Russian maintenance protocol calls for a passive cooling cycle to prevent electronics damage. This is a known system characteristic, documented in open-source technical literature. And for 3 weeks, Russian EW operators at this compound ran that cooling cycle on a clockwork schedule. Ukraine's reconnaissance team recorded it. Strike planners built the entire operational concept around it. The Krasuka-4's maintenance schedule became the mechanism of its own destruction. Real tactics, real consequences. Steel Horizon. Now, the quiz answer. How many Krasuka-4 systems did Ukraine destroy in the initial June 3rd strike? The answer is B3. All 3 platforms in the compound's vehicle bays were destroyed in the initial M31A1 salvo impact, confirmed by thermal and optical post-strike imagery. The Neptune derivative loitering munitions that struck 11 seconds later added destruction to the external infrastructure, but all 3 primary targets were eliminated in the first detonation sequence. The total number of EW platforms removed from Russian order of battle in this sector since the initial strike, counting the 2 replacement vehicles destroyed on June 7th and June 9th, is 5. Will Russia reconstitute meaningful EW coverage in the Zaporizhzhia sector within the next 6 months? Comment yes or no, and tell us which part of Ukraine's targeting process they would need to defeat first to do it. The tactical lessons of the Tokmak EW node operation are clear. First, electronic warfare assets are high-priority targets precisely because they degrade the weapon systems. FPV drones, precision munitions, that modern armies depend on most. Protecting them requires the same discipline as protecting command posts or ammunition depots. Fixed positions on predictable schedules are vulnerabilities, not force multipliers. Second, intelligence-driven targeting can achieve effects that direct firepower cannot. 3 weeks of reconnaissance produced targeting data precise enough to destroy all 3 platforms in a single salvo. Random artillery fire against the same target might have missed entirely. Third, the 40-minute vulnerability window shows that every complex military system has a maintenance-driven Achilles heel. Finding and exploiting that window was the decisive element of the entire operation. Was the GUR's decision to spend 4 weeks on intelligence preparation before striking the right call, given that Ukrainian FPV operations were significantly degraded throughout that period? Could Russian EW command have preserved these assets through better operational security protocols? And what would you have done differently as the Ukrainian commander responsible for restoring drone operations to the Tokmak sector? There is no single answer to any of those questions. What there is this. 3 Krasuka-4 platforms, confirmed destroyed. 68% improvement in FPV link integrity within 72 hours. 5 Russian EW assets removed from the Zaporizhzhia order of battle since June 3, 2026. And a 30-day operational cycle that showed Ukraine's capacity to fight and win in the electromagnetic spectrum. Not by matching Russian electronic warfare, but by thinking past it. Subscribe to Steel Horizon. We break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. The compound near Tokmak is quiet now. The burned vehicle bays are what's left. And somewhere in the Russian rear area, the commanders responsible for reconstituting electronic warfare coverage in this sector are working with the knowledge that Ukraine can find them, time them, and strike them at the exact moment they cannot protect themselves. Modern warfare doesn't just punish tactical mistakes. It finds them, studies them, times them, and eliminates them at the moment of maximum vulnerability. Stay vigilant.